We Who Wrestle With God is Jordan B. Peterson's newest book. This is Jordan Peterson.
People have asked me whether or not I believe in God, and I've answered in various ways. No, but I'm afraid he probably exists.
He may not be a Christian, but he acknowledges that the Bible has much wisdom that shapes us today as individuals, and that's what We Who Wrestle With God is all about. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Liz. I love reading books and stuff, so this channel is all about that. And in this video, we're gonna see how Jordan seamlessly connects insightful biblical stories to our current world. Some lessons are extremely thought-provoking, some even incredibly controversial, and all this boils down to just one deadly sin. Avoiding this sin can change your entire life, but first, let's take it step by step, starting with the story of Adam and Eve.
In the beginning, God formed man from the dust of the ground. He planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he placed the man. In the midst of the garden, God placed the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And God commanded the man, saying, "Of this tree you shall not eat, or you shall surely die." Now of every living creature God brought to the man, and whatever the man called them, that was its name. Then God fashioned a woman from the man's rib and brought her to the man as companion to bear a family and to nurture the land. Man and his wife were both naked and felt no shame. But the serpent came to the woman and tempted her. "Eat of this fruit, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." She took of the fruit and ate, then gave some to her husband, and he ate also. Then the eyes of both were open, and they knew they were naked.
This is the first part of Adam and Eve's story, eating of the forbidden fruit. Now, this is how Jordan interprets the different sins of Adam and Eve. This is Eve's sin. My compassion is so all-encompassing that it can convert and incorporate even that which is deadly poison. And Adam's sin, I can retool and rename order itself indefinitely, all to impress Eve. Both presume too much, albeit for different reasons. Essentially, sins of pride in both cases. But the story, unfortunately, doesn't end here.
When God confronted both Adam and Eve, Adam said to God, "The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate." The words he says here have two levels of blame. First, he blames Eve, then he blames God for putting Eve with him.
Now, here is my somewhat unrefined attempt to apply this to our everyday lives, using this graphic from illustrator Janice Ozolin's, which I thought was perfect. When you have a lot of wisdom, you have a lot of questions. You ask yourself, is the serpent telling the truth? Why would it be telling me to do something that God doesn't want me to do? Let me think and evaluate the pros and cons when listening to God versus listening to the serpent. However, in reality, before eating the forbidden fruit, Eve didn't hesitate too much. She was filled with ego, pride, what Jordan calls the narcissism of compassion. She believed that she had all the answers and she could consume even deadly poison and it would be okay. After all, she was here to nurture the planet alongside Adam. It's the same with Adam. He had what Jordan calls the narcissism of competence. God let him name every single living creature on Earth. Surely he could eat this mere fruit. How often do we fall into the same trap, ignoring the wisdom behind the rules and acting impulsively? We ignore advice from experienced mentors, convinced that we know better. We disregard warning signs in relationships, certain that we can handle whatever comes our way. This diagram can be applied to lots of different situations too. After pridefully accepting Eve's challenge, Adam could have refused to cast the blame on his mate and the divine force that produced her. He could have accepted responsibility for his insufficiency and atoned. But no, he doubled down on his pride, extending it even to self-righteously and self-pityingly claiming moral superiority over God in the exact words of Jordan Peterson. And the consequences of Adam and Eve's pride? Self-consciousness, Adam and Eve's nakedness, and a painful downfall, where God curses on them the pain in childbearing and the necessity of toil, hard labor, work, and even death. But the story of pride doesn't end in the garden. In fact, it's just the beginning of a pattern that repeats itself throughout history and in our own lives, and the next biblical story on the list is the one of Cain and Abel.
Eve conceived and bore Cain, and later she bore his brother Abel. Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Cain brought to God an offering of the fruit of the ground. Abel brought the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. God regarded Abel and his offering, but he did not regard Cain and his offering. Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. God said to Cain, "Why are you angry? If you do well, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it." In the course of time, Cain spoke to Abel. When they were in the field, Cain killed his brother. And God said to Cain, "You are cursed from the earth."
This is a tragic tale of resentment and murder involving Adam and Eve's first two sons, Cain and Abel. Now, this is how Jordan explains what went down, how Cain went so wrong, and how all of us actually have a little bit of Cain inside of us. Abel works hard and works honestly, sacrificing only what is of the highest quality. He offers not only the perfect firstborn of his flock, but all the fat of that firstborn, which is the fruitful and richest part, and the aroma of which, when burned, is something that God has been said to savor. On the other hand, what does Cain do? He offers not the heavenly fruit, but fruit of the ground. In simple terms, he doesn't give his best in his offerings. Now, when God tells Cain off for his half-hearted efforts, what does Cain do? He should have noted his error, strive to improve, and perhaps even be grateful for the lesson that failure has brought him. But instead, he refused to improve, and even instead voluntarily opened the door to sin, which God explicitly warned him about. In modern day terms, this is also known as the victim mentality. I'm sure this has happened to you, like it has to me. Previously, when I first started on YouTube and my videos didn't do well, I would get upset. No one would watch them, thinking that the algorithm hates me, the audience doesn't appreciate me. It sounds so silly now when I'm actually talking the words out. But honestly, it took a really long time to get to the point where I just started to think, oh, maybe my content just isn't good enough. I need to keep improving. I need to value my audience's time. That was the Cain inside of me. Now, Jordan also goes through much more extreme examples of Cain in modern society. The first example, every school shooter has his now stereotyped manifesto, his false prophecy, his well-developed and long brooded upon rationale. The second example, the transmitting of childhood abuse down generations. And he makes this chilling statement: everyone has sufficient reason for evil. But despite that, Jordan urges us to take away the two morals of this story. First, everything possible must be directed upward to the highest possible aim. Even if you're not Christian and your highest possible aim isn't God, do what is best for humanity, or for your country, for your city, for your family, for your partner, parents, or children. And second, someone victimized, however unfairly, could well and should conclude from their experience not that such hurt should be paid forward, but that such acts are wrong and to reject their furtherance. And by always noting these two biblical principles, we at least have some sort of foundation when keeping in check our individual resentment. However, pride sometimes extends beyond individuals to entire societies. Our next story explores how collective pride, when left unchallenged, can have far-reaching and unexpected impact.
The Bible's first builders of cities were significantly the children of Cain. One day they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens." God came down to see the city and the tower and said, "Behold, they are one people and they have one language. This is only the beginning of what they will do. Let us confuse their language so that they may not understand one another's speech." God then scattered them from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city.
This is the story of God versus tyranny and pride, the story of the Tower of Babel. Jordan's modern day interpretations can be a little bit unconventional. First, we have the degeneration of femininity into commoditized sex, in other words, prostitution. Next, we have the false pride in mechanical mastery, that such pride is likely to ally itself with the spirit of domination, conquest, and power. Basically, that we worship our own science and technological mastery. This makes sense, Consider how some tech companies have evolved. Starting with noble goals of connecting people, they've now grown too big, and now we have issues of privacy, we have issues of scattered attention, and issues of social comparison and depression, amongst tons of other negative repercussions. On top of that, we also have global warming, the rise of AI, and genetic engineering. Will this lead to our downfall? Maybe, possibly, but I saved the best for last. What is the most controversial interpretation of them all? We find ourselves presently at war over the most basic of issues, that of sex and what is male and female. So by adopting other pronouns apart from he or she, what Jordan says is we have decided to usurp the right to absolute self-definition instead of following what God had intended. He or she. In fact, the person who insists on absolute self-definition is attempting to elevate the self to the level of God. This means a denial not only of the spiritual but also of the biological and the social. After all, failure to differentiate on the basis of sex means failure to propagate, and that means eventual extinction. At least I think that's what Jordan is saying. So, as you can tell, parts of this book are actually written to fight against some of the more woke perspectives in society. I don't think that his argument is that compelling, because I don't think that being of a different gender type means denying the traditional gender roles. Someone using a they pronoun doesn't mean that they are denying that you are a him or her, or that I'm a her, but that's just my opinion. The story of the Tower of Babel is thus, in essence, according to Jordan, a warning against humanity's tendency towards arrogance and misguided ambition. We don't have to abandon our ambitions, but we should approach it with caution and self-awareness. The overall theme behind all three stories here is pride as a deadly sin. In Adam and Eve, we saw pride as a general human emotion. In Cain and Abel, we saw pride in our individual life and work, and in the Tower of Babel, we saw pride in society. As I always say, take what you find valuable and leave the rest. I summarized Jordan's book, along with more than 10 other new releases in 2024 in this video on the screen, so do check it out for some insane value bombs.